brief intro to everybody. Mike is a bit famous on tax Twitter, but he is a firm owner in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who is a bit of a career changer late in life and a very authentic person and has a lot of value to bring to the industry and a lot of good stuff to say. So whenever you're ready, Mike.
All right. So I think Micah's program's pretty exciting to me. I kind of wish I'd have thought of something like it. We need a lot more EAs. I actually have ran a journeyman electrician apprenticeship program. I actually am a licensed electrician, and when I was the maintenance and purchasing manager at a factory, I actually ran a program to make other people electricians that I set up through a local community college. Worked out really, really well. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. So once you become an EA, there's a lot of things you can do. No matter what happens in your career, do not let any CPAs Bigfoot you and make you think they know more than you do. I know plenty about tax. I don't know anything about auditing. But half of the CPAs in the United States know nothing about tax because they spend their entire career in auditing. Well, that is not true of EAs. All EAs do is tax. So you can have some really bright CPAs and some really not so bright CPAs. You can have some really bright EAs and some really not bright EAs. Um, Both designations are very good ones, and I think they're both really cool. But if I had it all to do over again, I think I probably would have become an EA instead because at my firm, we don't do any assurance services. So why did I spend all this time becoming a CPA? Now, I'll admit being a CPA is a big marketing tool. There's a lot of people who call my office and they will only talk to a CPA. And that's a hurdle that you guys have that I do not. I can't tell you. The AI CPA has done an amazing job marketing the CPA credential, and nobody has done the same for the EA credential, which is a little sad. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the industry and what's going on. Today, there are 350,000 fewer accountants than there should be. That is a big shortage that you guys can fill in the tax world. There is good money to be made in tax. AI is kind of scaring some people. AI is going to affect some entry-level jobs. Learning software is important, but you guys should probably focus on becoming an EA first and worry about the rest when it comes. I think there's not been a better time to be a CPA or an EA in a long, long time. And I think the sky is the limit for everyone. Um, let's see what we want to talk about next. Would you guys prefer that I talk about the way I think the industry is going to go, or maybe answer some questions?
Say
I
that I
wouldn't
would.
mind you.
And I've been following you online for about 6 months, so I was curious to know about what you thought about the state of the IRS. I saw that there was a rumor that they could replace you or replace Billy Long with yourself.
Well, it would be fun if I could be the IRS commissioner. It will never happen, but I would love to be the IRS commissioner. I actually sent an email to my member of Congress and both senators and told them I'd like to, and I've never heard back. I know kidding would like to do it, but in my personal opinion, the IRS is a dumpster fire, and the dumpster fire is going to get much larger. I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of us in that. It's also discouraging at times. I got two tax notices today. I feel like I deal with so many tax notices now that it's kind of out of control. Most of them are wrong. And heaven forbid if you get tax notices from 2020 or 2021. I have multiple cases now where I'm going back and forth with the IRS and we're on like the sixth letter, and then I try to escalate it to the taxpayer advocate. I can't always get a hold of them, but the IRS is in trouble. You have to learn how to deal with the IRS. And I think learning how their online accounts and how the tax pro accounts work is going to be more and more important as time goes on. Um, And I think working with the IRS is about to get a little easier and harder in some ways because um, who knows anything about President Trump's executive order on paper checks? Supposedly on 9/30, they're not going to accept paper checks. Now they're going to. They don't have a choice. But I don't think next year we'll be sending in paper checks. Do you, Micah?
Very possibly now. We'll have to see. It's hard to imagine they'll ever reject a check. So, and people are going to keep sending checks for years to come. So we'll see. I heard some people on the NEA website were chatting about it.
So we talked about that, my partners and I today, and we have a lot of clients that are going to be resistive to it. And it's going to be hard to retrain them because I've been handing clients estimated tax payment vouchers, sometimes the same client for 20 years, and my wife for 24 consecutive years, right? To tell them that they can't do it that way anymore is, I mean, I'm going to flat out throw the IRS under the bus, right? And President Trump under the bus. And I'm going to say, look, it's not me. They won't take your payments that way. You've got to do it online. And I think the IRS is going to be a pretty big dumpster fire, Ronnie. I think they let too many experienced people go. Um, we're all at different points in our lives on this call, but if you look at the age of the IRS workforce, they're on average older than I am, and I'm 58. And they've lost a lot of very experienced people. And there's been so many times when the IRS has not been allowed to hire that there's gaps. If you look at like the years of experience in the IRS, there's several big gaps. And I don't know how they're going to do certain audits. Have any of you been involved with a tax gap audit in your careers? No? Micah, you have not either?
I was just saying this to Sarah recently. I really rarely come across audits. I notices nonstop, but actual audits, can't remember ever even seeing one. Maybe like peripherally.
So if any of you ever come across a tax gap audit, feel free to give me a call. Because tax gap audits, we've only come across one. And I think between the four CPAs in my office, we've been doing this for 84 years. And a tax gap audit is where the IRS audits everything on your tax return. And the intent of that tax gap audit is to figure out the total underpayments in the United States. So they will make you show copies of $10 donation receipts. I had a $25 donation thrown off the return because the wording at the bottom was not correct. Right now, they won't do that unless it's a tax gap audit, right? They don't do that. They're not that anal. But boy, those tax gap audits, they are something. That is for darn sure. So let's talk a little bit about the industry. I think it's a great time to come in the industry. I think it's a great time to become an EA, but you need to understand technology. You need to have an open mind. You need to be part of a group so that you can understand what's going on. The profession, the CPA profession, and the EA profession. I don't know as much about the EA profession, so I'll rely on Micah for that. The CPA profession is graying. It is older. It is retiring in mass. 3 years ago, I went to a live event in Fort Wayne. I was a 55-year-old man. I was the oldest person at my firm, and two other firm owners called us kids. Yep, they call us kids because in my town, the average firm owner's in their late 70s or early 70s or maybe late 60s. I live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but I'm telling you, they're retiring in mass and it's leaving chaos in their wake. But that chaos is an opportunity for you guys, right? I know of 3 firms in Fort Wayne out of 14 that have between 2 and 10 CPAs that are trying to switch from compliance only to advisory first firms, and they all 3 plan on letting go 60% of their clients by 1/1. Their clients don't know it yet. It's all going to be done based on price. They're going to send out letters. They're going to say, hey, we're going to advisory first. Those of you who want to be advisory first and pay us more money, you'll be our clients. The rest of you need to find someone else. Now, they're going to say it in a much nicer way than that, but think about what that's doing to the profession. It's happening everywhere, man. It's happening. Have you seen any of that, Micah?
Yeah, nonstop. Yes, a lot of people retiring. So definitely.
So the opportunity is great. Again, the focus has to be on getting your credential first. And then once you have your credential, the sky is the limit. One of the things that a lot of people tell me that they're nervous about is once they get their credential, and Micah's handling helping you get the credential. Once you have the credential, are you going to be able to find work? Well, you are. 530 different potential new clients that I know of, that I have their information recorded, contacted my firm last year with $0 spent. I expect it to hit 600 next year. Because people are desperate for help. They can't find anybody to do their taxes. When people get notices, their reaction, and it's hard. I'm struggling with it in my firm right now. I have a lot of clients getting notices, and do you know what they think happened? Who would like to guess besides Micah? When my client gets their first notice, what do they think?
Audit.
That you did something wrong.
I'm going to go with what Sarah said. They think I made a mistake. I heard one of my partner's clients drop by the office today or yesterday. I can't, it's a blur. Today or yesterday, and say, here's a notice. Let them know I'm not unhappy that they made a mistake, but here's the notice, right? That's just the way a lot of people think. We've been working at it pretty hard in my firm to convince people that's not the way it is and that most notices are wrong. But people, the first reaction they will have to an IRS notice is that I made a mistake. It's just the way it is. It's just something you have to deal with. Once you get your credential, you have to learn how to deal with notices. Notices have become a serious, serious part of life. So, who would like to talk about something specific?
Anyone can ask any questions. I think it'll be helpful if you spoke about your background, how you got into accounting in the first place.
So I will do that. So I joined the Navy and I was on a nuclear submarine in Hawaii. I met my wife in Honolulu, Hawaii. She was a nanny. She actually was going back to school to get her post-bachelor certificate in accounting. She has a degree in international business. I was a reactor operator on a nuclear submarine. We dated, we got engaged. I was going to stay in the Navy until I met her. Submarines are not for married people. Her parents were mad at me for a long time, decades probably, because we didn't get married till after I got out of the Navy, because I wasn't going to get married while I was in the Navy on a submarine. It was not going to happen. We got married 2 months after I got out, right? And it's just not a conducive life. So when I got out of the Navy, I sent out 1,050 resumes. It's not a joke. I sent out 1,050 resumes. My father-in-law was a high school teacher at the time, and he used to tell that story to all his students. He's like, my son-in-law wants a job. And I sent out resumes all over the United States. And when you really look at your life, and you are all making a change in your life, when you really think about it, that which way you go in a career is a big deal. I had a job offer in the Aleutian Islands working at a weapons disposal facility. I had a job to be an electrician in the Saudi oil fields. I really wanted to take that job, but I really didn't want Karina to be wearing a burqa and not able to drive a car in Saudi Arabia at the time. So we did not go there. I had a job offer at Intel. I had a job offer at Los Alamos Labs. I had a job at a civilian nuclear power plant, and I had a job working for the Postal Service, traveling the country and teaching them how their new equipment worked. I mean, so I worked at the nuclear power plant. We moved to Nebraska. I moved irradiated nuclear fuel rods with a crane. I was a operator in a power plant, and I didn't like it as a civilian. So I did that for a couple years. And then we moved to Kansas City, Missouri. I took a job in a steel mill. It was a unionized factory. It's a dirty, awful place. Had a community of homeless people. You had to be careful where you walked. It was on the second busiest train tracks in the United States. I became a journeyman electrician there. My dad died. We moved back to Fort Wayne. I worked as the lead electrician at a foundry. I worked at a Pepsi bottling plant as their computer guy. And then I was the maintenance and purchasing manager at a factory. And then in early 2003, I went to China. My son was born premature. He was 2 weeks old when I went to China, and I helped install equipment in China at a factory in Shenzhen. And that's when I realized I needed to get out of manufacturing because we were going to offshore a lot of manufacturing, which note we did. I was correct. It happened. And my wife was a CPA at the time. She worked in public accounting. She decided when our daughter was born that she was going to start a business out of our house. So she'd been running her own little business out of our house for a couple years. Our file cabinet was our stairway leading up to the loft. People would come to pick up their tax returns and their returns. Some of them still remember today were lined up the stairs in our house, like in between the railings. That was our filing system. And basically, we decided that when I was 37 years old, I was going to go back to college. And I left my job as a maintenance and purchasing manager at a factory. I went back to college when I was 37, and I had a master plan. And you'll get a kick out of the master plan. The master plan was I would go to college, I would work for my wife part-time because I thought it would be a struggle. And then I would work for her full-time for a year. I would pass the CPA exam. And then I would go be the maintenance manager at a steel mill or something like that. Because how many people have been a member of 3 unions, who have been a member of management for 4 years in a factory and are a CPA? I'm going to say the list is probably pretty short, right? So I thought, hey, I can go there and say I carry tools. I was a member of management, and I'm a certified public accountant. Hire me. But instead, I worked for Karina's firm and I really liked it. And now we've grown it ever since. So sometimes the best laid plans of men change. You're all doing something different. So realize plans change, figure out what you want to do, accomplish it, and 5 years from now, who knows what you'll be doing. I will tell you that when I went back to college in 2004, I did not think I'd be running a CPA firm with my wife 21 years later. But yet I am, and I really like it. I really thought I was going to go be a plant manager at a foundry or a steel mill or something along those lines. But that's just not the way life happened. There is a tremendous amount of opportunity in our field. Taxes are great. If you can do taxes and financial planning both, that's even greater. I look back at my life and I look at a lot of forks in the road. In 2007, I was a CPA and I decided I needed to do something else. And I really had a hard time deciding what. And I was deciding between getting accredited in valuing businesses or becoming a financial planner. I picked the wrong one because I have a tremendous number of financial planners I work with. And I knew if I became a financial planner, they were not going to want to keep sending us tax clients because they would look at us as the competition. And our two biggest referral sources are financial planners. And I'm going to say a third of my wife's business today is from her second client, who's a big financial planner. But in hindsight, we would be way better off if I'd have become a financial planner back in 07. So sometimes you choose wrong, but the key is to accomplish what you want to accomplish, keep your eyes open, and change as you go.
Can you go into that a little bit more about the combination of what could have been with like the CFP route with tax? Like what does that look like together?
I sure can. And I really think I think that is a really good way to go today because a lot of people consider their CPA or their EA potentially to be the head of their team. A lot of people consider the financial planner to be the head of their team. If you're both, then you kind of have everything, right? You are like a one source shop for financial and tax information. Also, I think as the industry is changing today, more and more CPAs and EAs are moving away from tax compliance and into tax advisory. If you're going to move into tax advisory and you do financial planning, I think you have a leg up. And I think you can make a lot of money doing that. Now, interestingly enough, I'll never forget this till the day I die. My daughter's 17. My son was 15 at the time. They're 24 and 22 now. And I used to give them in the summer what they call summer binders. And they used to cry to their friends about them. And it was, I mean, you would think I was torturing them. And what a summer binder was, they were off for the summer from school. And we would give them basically a workbook and say, you have to accomplish this workbook in the summer instead of play computer games all summer, right? You have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And then they had to turn them in every couple weeks. And like a project was, you have to explain to me in writing what 3 careers you're considering and how much money you would make and if you'd have to go to college. And I remember asking both my kids, you didn't put accounting on here. And they're like, oh God, no, Dad, I don't want to work the hours you and Mom work. I'm not going to do that. And my son's currently in IT in the Navy. And my daughter became a CFP last month, right? She's a CFP at Vanguard. And she's doing quite well. And it's a great career for her. What she brags to me about, this happened last night on the phone, by the way. She only works 17, 1,800 hours a year, right? And she's making pretty darn good money for being a 24-year-old person. But while there's a lot of CPAs retiring and there's a lot of EAs retiring, there's also a lot of financial planners retiring because the exact same thing happened with financial planners. If you look around the room at a lot of financial planners, pardon my French, a lot of them are old white men, right? A lot of them are. And they're in their 50s, their 60s, and their 70s. And a lot of them have made a lot of money and they want to get out. And in fact, last night, my daughter told us her roommate, and my daughter's very upset about this, by the way. Her roommate has been offered from Edward Jones to move back home to rural Indiana and take over an Edward Jones office. She's not even a CFP yet, but they're recruiting actively because she's from a tiny town in Indiana. And I don't know where you all live. Where do you live, Micah, by the way?
I'm in North Jersey, like half an hour outside Manhattan.
Okay, well, that's a totally different animal than rural Indiana. But
Yeah.
but depending on where you live, like Fort Wayne, it's often difficult for us to hire people in Fort Wayne because people who are in Fort Wayne who go to a 4-year college and get a degree in accounting, do they want to live in Fort Wayne, Indiana? Only half. The other half want to move to Chicago, Indianapolis, or a big city because they think it's more exciting, right? So if you're in a rural community or not a destination community, it's harder to recruit. So her roommate is 23 years old and is being offered an Edward Jones office, right? Because the person in the Edward Jones office is 77 years old and needs to retire, right? So they need somebody to move to this small town and take it over. So this is one of those things to where get your credential, become an EA, become a CFP. But I think a CFP EA is a very powerful combination. I think it's a very powerful combination. I think if I had it all to do over again, I think that's probably the way I would go. I might go CPA depending on what I wanted, but college is expensive. You've got 4 years wrapped up in that. I think knowing what I know now, I think maybe I would have become an EA, worked for a tax practice, then become a CFP, and then kind of do tax planning, tax compliance, and financial planning for a smaller number of high income clients. I think that's probably a very winning ticket. Does that answer your question, Ronnie, or no?
That was incredible. Thank you.
But I really think the sky is the limit. Don't limit yourselves on technology. You've got to know technology. But to do any of this, you have to finish your credential first. You have to get done. And it's no fun. But you have to do it, right? And everything hinges on that. And what's interesting is I've been a CPA since over 18 years. How many people asked me how many times I took the exam? Nobody. How many people asked me what my score was? Nobody. Ever. Ever. Once you are an EA or a CPA, that's all people care about, right? They want to see the letters. And other than that, it's how you carry yourselves. Um, Building your confidence is a big deal too. If there was something else that I would say to try to do, is to learn how to build your confidence. Because if you go out on your own, it's hard. One of my partners actually went to Toastmasters because he was so nervous in front of people. And now he deals with people all the time and he does a great job. When we hire new people, we make them do some things that don't make them comfortable and they don't like it. They have to learn how to cover the front of the office. They have to learn how to call clients. They have to learn how to do that. And I'm going to tell you, it's painful for me to listen to them do it because I mean it hurts me, but they won't learn unless they have to do it, right? And dealing with people is part of what you have to do. And I think natively, most CPAs and EAs, they're kind of number cruncher, non-outgoing, geeky math people and
Grumpy too.
sloppy. And no, I'm none of that. Look at all my stickies behind me. I mean, if I post pictures in my garage, it will scare you because everything's labeled in drawers, right? Because it must be that way. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just had a question about that confidence building. Are there any exercises or ways that you can do that outside of like work, just like in general to prepare for that opportunity?
I actually think there is. I actually think there is. I think building confidence is hard for a lot of people. I really think if you're not good at dealing with people specifically, and that's not necessarily what you said, I like Toastmasters. There's these BNI networking groups all over the place, and they always want to have a CPA or an EA in them all the time. And they basically, you go there and they have you give a 1 or 2 minute elevator speech over and over and over and over, and it builds your confidence. I think if you have some hobbies that you're good at and you pursue them, you can build your confidence. I think if you're becoming an EA, once you pass the exams, you build your confidence. I don't think that most people should go from studying for the EA exam and being an EA to immediately running their own firm. I think what most people should do is be a contractor or an employee of somebody else for a period of time and use that time to kind of build your experience and your confidence. I've seen a lot of people really struggle with this issue. It's probably one of the reasons why I've probably built an online following like I have on X. is I'm not shy. I'm not afraid to say what I think, right? I'm kind of not personality-wise your typical accountant. Um, I don't know, but do you feel, Redwan, that you have a little bit of maybe imposter syndrome?
No, it's mostly just kind of getting that exposure. I think that's just what I'm concerned about. Just getting that exposure and getting used to it is my
So I think another good way to build up your confidence is once you become an EA, maybe you connect with EAs and CPAs who are looking to hire some work out, and you do that work for them and kind of report to them for a period of time. And maybe you do this for three different people. And I think that's a really good confidence builder because then you're doing work for somebody else and giving it to somebody else. They're kind of reviewing it, etc. Um, I've seen that work pretty well. And I know that Micah plans on providing a lot of that type of of help. And I think that's going to be really valuable for people, especially who are introverted, right? Not everybody's outgoing. I mean, I used to go to live CPE all the time, and I would walk up to random people and say, "Howdy, I'm Mike Sylvester," and they'd be like appalled that I would talk to them, right? Because everybody like would stay with their own groups, and the only people in the room they would talk to are people at their firm, a prior firm, or they went to college with, right? And I would go in, scan the room, see like six people I knew, and go nowhere near them, and go to people I didn't know and say, "Howdy, I'm Mike Sylvester," right? And if if you're a little awkward with people, maybe you do that. Maybe you go to some conferences, you go to some CPE, you go from some events and say, "Howdy, I'm Ben," or "Howdy, I'm Sarah," or "Howdy, I'm Ronnie." And I think, you do that a few times and you talk to some different people and you realize that other people don't know everything either. I mean, I can't tell you how many times recently I've read a post inside the community I co-founded and people are asking a tax question, and I'm like, I don't even know what that form is. I've never heard of that form. Of course, I'm not going to try to answer that question. We'll leave that to somebody that knows that. But yet, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still see people post things about things that I've never even heard of. And if that happens to me, well, I think it happens to everybody, don't you, Micah?
Definitely.
I mean, has that happened
Yes.
to you recently, Micah?
I stay far away from those posts. If I see a couple lines that I don't recognize what's happening,
Yeah,
okay. Ish is
yeah.
the man for those.
And in the beginning, man, I tried to answer some, and then somebody else would post the real answer, and I go, "Oh shoot, I should have kept my mouth shut." And so now I just don't do it anymore. Um, but I always wanted to try. But it's a big field. There's a lot going on. And I think if there was one other thing I would want to encourage you to do after you have your credentials, I think specializing is really powerful today. I think people who specialize make more money in every field. I think that EAs have just as many opportunities to specialize. I mean, I surprise a lot of people. I think the four CPAs in my firm, I think we've been CPAs for 84 years. And yet, if somebody calls and says, "Hey man, I have a business in South Korea, can you help me?" The answer is immediately no. No, I can't. I don't do international tax. And they're like, "Well, can't you make an exception?" No, no, I can't. I don't do international tax. Or somebody will call and they will have this complicated web of trusts that ends in some foreign country. And they'll be like, "Can't you help with this?" I'm like, "No, I don't do this," right? So I think Specializing is powerful, and I think saying no is maybe more powerful. No is a word you need to learn how to use if you run your own business.
I'll add my 2 cents to that. I think it's an interesting question about building confidence. I would say I naturally did not have a lot of confidence and generally introverted and shy. And then as I gained expertise, I gained confidence. So being an expert on a subject really, I think, helps build confidence. The credentials help, but really just knowing that I know a subject that so few people in the US know, certainly to the depth that I know it. And also just looking around and seeing the competition and seeing people who have so much confidence and there's so little behind it. And then exposure therapy helps a lot. Just diving in. That part hurts and sucks, but it works. It's like doing reps. So that's how I eventually got confidence. Still struggle with it sometimes. It depends on the environment, but also leaning into your interests and passions help a lot because when you're talking about something that you love or you're passionate about or is interesting, usually people are naturally confident about that. So I've become passionate about tax and finances and things like that. So when I talk about it, it's something that interests me. It's like almost like a hobby in a sense at this point. So all those things have definitely helped.
And I think another thing to keep in mind if you have confidence problems, and I know this in some ways may not help that, but it should. More than 60% of tax returns that I see from new clients are wrong. There's a lot of people making errors. I make errors. I still make errors. Everybody makes errors. But if you stay in your lane, learn, and develop a small network of people you can bounce things off of, it's extremely powerful. When Karina started our firm, that's my wife, my God, 24 years ago, other CPA firms would not talk to her because they considered her the competition. I remember driving around with her and leaving flyers places when she was advertising her business. We used to send a lot of direct mail. But in the old days, there was no online communities like this where you could talk to people and say, hey, did I do this right? And it's very powerful. I did 2 coaching calls last week with clients, with people who are CPAs who just bought firms. One of them, I went through 3 different complicated tax returns they had where they had questions on S corp basis, right? And I'm kind of a basis Nazi, and I get really into basis. But then there was another person that reached out to me from that same group and said, hey, Mike, can you teach me about partnership basis? And you know what my answer was? No, I can't. I know something about partnership basis, but I don't know enough. You know, I can fight my way through it, but I don't want to fight my way through yours, right? And you know what you know? There's a lot to learn. Learn how to say no and get your credentials.
Thank you very much, Mike. Anyone have last questions before we end?
It
All
was
right,
nice
thanks.
meeting you all. I hope you guys have a great day. Okay.
You too, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
it's fun. I'll do it
Bye.
again. It's
All right,
fun.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
All
you.
right. You guys have a good day.
Thank you,
You
Mike.
too.
Take care.
Take care. Take
Bye.
care, everybody.